So I think most people probably know me. I'm Atiha Chaudry, so I'm the chair for the Greater Manchester BAME Network and the Leaders Forum. I am also quite associated with the Manchester BME Network too, and I'm a trustee of GMCVO. So really pleased to see so many people here. It's wonderful. Part of our work has been to actually try and connect people to what's around, what funding is around, as soon as we possibly can. So we've done quite a few of these Meet the Funder type of Zoom meetings, or Zoom meetings on what's around and what funding is out there. So it's great. If you are members of GM BAME networks, you will get these mail outs kind of directly from us because you'll be on our databases. But if you're not, please join. It's free for BAME-led organizations and groups. So just need to go to the GMCVO website and go to GM BAME Network and just join up and register, and you'll get onto the database. It's free and you'll get things directly. We do a monthly mail out, but obviously at the moment everything's at pace. So emails are going out with information all of the time. So you can put your email in the chat box and we can pick that up and write to you as well to encourage you to, or remind you to join. Owen's just put that link on the web, in the chat box, so you can do that. So I'm really pleased. We've got Paul and Carrina here from the Lankelly Chase. They're really good funders. They've been, as some people already know, been around for some time. They have recently had quite a dedication on our region, on Greater Manchester. So I thought it would be really useful for them to say a little bit about the work that they're doing and the fund that they currently have, how that works, because I know that they're trying to do things in a slightly more innovative and creative way, which I think is useful, to be very different in that sense, and how that might suit some of our organizations. So I'm not going to say a great deal more other than I know there's a lot of you here and we do want to know who and where. So when you do speak, just say a little bit about who you are and what organization and community that you work in. It'll be useful. I'm going to pass over to Paul and Carrina in a minute, who will give you an outline of the fund, and then you'll have a bit of chance to have some questions and discussion. If we finish early, that's fine. I'm sure everybody can do with time at the moment. But that's kind of where we are. If you've got any questions, again, add them to the chat box so that I can pick them up and I can see where they're coming from. And if we don't get time for any reason to get to your question, we'll have logged them and I'll try and get back to you via Paul and Carrina on those questions, if that's okay. Brill. So over to you, Paul and Carrina.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you. Nice to meet you. Caveat, we're going to keep this pretty informal. Firstly, because that's more of who we are. And also we just thought it would be, we're more interested in being present here for any questions that you have, rather than a grand kind of PowerPoint presentation on who Lankelly Chase is and stuff like that. But if at the end of it, people think that you want to know a bit more, then I can share more stuff. But the way that we've decided to split our time is that I'll talk a little bit about Lankelly Chase and how long we've been in Greater Manchester for and the types of work that we're doing. And then Paul, who is our associate in Greater Manchester, talk about the fund. Is that what we said, Paul?
Yeah, that sounds good to me.
Right.
Yeah, if you want to pop questions in the chat as you go, we will try and get around to them all definitely today. And there will be time to ask them as well.
And so in terms of Lankelly Chase, I've got a bit of performance anxiety now. I know an old trustee is here. But anyway, so Lankelly Chase has been around for about 60 years, and it used to be two independent foundations. who joined together about, I think probably about 12 years ago now, and they both wanted to remain anonymous. So we're entirely independent as a foundation, not even with any family involved. So I think that's fairly unique as a foundation in the philanthropic world. Since Oxford, which is where they kind of were before they moved to London, I think we were a fairly traditional grant giver. And then they brought in Julian Corner, our current CEO, who about 8 years ago, with a kind of fairly new team, shifted our focus. So rather than looking at or the shift was very much, let me say this in a positive way, the shift was very much to what are the root causes that cause distress in society, and how can we tackle root causes? So we very much shifted from individual grants to, for example, and there's nothing wrong with this, but fixing church roofs, to why are the church roofs broken in the first place, type of thing. And so we are a foundation who supports funding for systemic change. And we have spent our time thinking about how do we shift systems that perpetuate extreme disadvantage. So very much working with people who are subject to marginalisation and find themselves on the margins of the margins because of the system that keeps them locked in cycles of oppression. We very recently, I think, our mission has always been, since I've been there for 5 years, to change systems that perpetuate disadvantage. And what we've meant by that is the intersection of homelessness, extreme poverty, substance misuse, mental ill health, violence and domestic violence, and also coming into contact with the criminal justice system, all within and under systems of oppression. So that for class, gender, and race. And then I guess most recently, we've really tried to focus on the vision. And so, so for us, we have come through kind of quite an intense period where we standing firmly in wanting to be very clear that we are working towards societies that are just and liberated, and where people who are subject to marginalisation can live with dignity and with opportunity. And and that's the first time we've really articulated that, which is really good because it roots us squarely in the intersection of racial justice and social justice. And then we're also looking through our investments of how we use our investments to look at climate justice as well, because they're all connected. As part of this kind of systems change strategy, we've been doing the easiest way to kind of, I guess, to see it in action is to look at place-based work. And so that is why we find ourselves in Greater Manchester. So I've been at Lankelly Chase for 5 years, but I think for at least 7 or 8, we've been funding organisations who are based in Greater Manchester. And that's kind of coalesced around our place-based work. I don't know if people know Unlimited Potential in Salford, Just Life, who are looking at housing. And then most recently, organisations like our agency, and we did a big piece of place-based work called the Elephant Series about 4 years ago, which some of you may or may not know about, which is really helped us to understand and appreciate all the different elements of transformative co-production. And so within our place-based work, we lots of our work is all about disrupting power structures. And we've been given a set of indicators that tell us, and it's by people and places that tell us the kind of principles that need to be in place for systems to really change. And they are around participation, power, and perspective. And they're all on the website that we've created, but just thought I'd give you that as a bit of background. And just very briefly, the final bit is what we've been looking at as a foundation, because we feel very uncomfortable with this, is it isn't really right that a foundation that is I guess head office is in London make decisions about places.
Sorry, I'm losing internet.
Can you still hear me? Yeah. Yeah, we've been fairly uncomfortable with the fact that a bunch of well-meaning, very lovely people make funding decisions about people in places that are quite far away. And so what we have worked out with our trustees is how to devolve decision-making so that people who are closer to the problems are actually starting to make decisions about how that money and how resources are spent locally to try and shift systems. And we call it devolved decision-making. I'm sure there are many other words for it and many other phrases, but for us, it's about devolved decision-making. And we've just signed off with our trustees who are incredibly courageous to kind of give us all of this freedom to do this work, to set up a team in Greater Manchester so that we can start to be the first stage in this, really looking at how do we devolve decision making further and further away and from Lankelly Chase, but closer to communities that the money should be serving. And that is where Paul and I come in. So all of our place-based work, we have an associate. So we're in York, Birmingham, Greater Manchester, Barrow, Barking and Dagenham, and Oxford. And each of those has an associate in, so Paul times 5. And then there will always be a Lankelly Chase lead. And in Greater Manchester, we have a team of 6. So there's 2 of us from Lankelly Chase. There is Paul. There is the wonderful Rose, who I believe most of you will probably know, Rose Sarley from Mama Health Network. And then there is a lady called Afshan Delozy, and I've know her through the LGBT Foundation, but also through a creative network that I'm a part of. And then there's Matt Kidd, who I first came into contact with through the Elephant series. And it's the first time that Lankelly Chase are in a minority in a group around decision-making for funding, which is super exciting, really exciting. And one of the reasons that this fund is so exciting for us is because ideally it really starts to reach into networks where we currently have a massive blind spot. So what we have found is that as we've been looking at extreme disadvantage through the lens of homelessness, if you look at all the data and all the services that are used, you will predominantly get white working class men appearing. However, if you look at extreme and multiple versions of disadvantage or systems of oppression, unfortunately, that group is much more diverse. And so we have, and much bigger, but we have, and so we have a real intention of how do we actually reach into different parts of the network where we currently are not a part of. I think, and so yeah, the reason that for me this fund is really exciting is because we hope that by next year we'll really get a sense of all the different networks that we're not a part of but that exist, and hopefully kind of convening a critical mass of people who consider yourself to be change makers or who are really interested in learning. Because I think the final point for me about Lankelly Chase is that we're a learning-led organisation, rooted in action inquiry, so very much cycles of planning, acting, reflecting, adapting. So we are always looking to reflect, gather feedback, and then iterate, and then see where we need to go next. But we really, I think there's something super exciting about, for us, connecting to more of the system or connecting more of the system to itself. In part, I think that also means us plugging into the system that already exists. I think I should stop talking now. But that just about covers it, Paul. Would you add anything else?
No, I think that's really good. I mean, that's why I'm going to talk about the fund itself. So yeah, thank you, Carrina. So I should say as well that team that was set up that Carrina describes was probably set up April time or something like that. So kind of just after lockdown had started, and we've come together virtually. We have never met in person as a group, but and we've been going out. Well, say going out. We've been speaking to lots of people virtually again, and we came to the BAME Leaders Network in June or July or something, and we've spoke to lots of different groups, and kind of it's those conversations that's kind of led us towards this fund, really. So it's come out of the conversations we've been having in Greater Manchester. Can
I just say, Paul, can you just clarify? So it's wonderful to hear the team you've got. Are they all paid officers of Lankelly Chase, are they?
No, I mean, there's two people that are paid staff members of Lankelly Chase. I'm an associate, so I'm not an actual staff member. And then I think the others are on contracts for specific pieces of work. So they're all linked into some aspects of Lankelly Chase's work. But we certainly, I mean, that group is a temporary group, and we've set it up. And hopefully, as I described the fund and kind of what Carrina was suggesting there around the direction we want to go, that actually it's going to become a much bigger group and a much bigger network anyway, that leads into sort of the decision making and things like that. So we see it as the stage one really of a longer process.
Paul,
yeah.
Should we just see if there's any clarifying questions about Lankelly Chase before we get into the fund?
Yeah.
I want to focus more on the fund, but
could I just say, Carrina, I think I'd like Paul to finish the funding because I think that's important, and then we can, if people could bank their questions for you and Paul, because I think the thing that we all here to hear is the funding.
Okay, so yeah, so you might have seen it already, I'm not sure, but I'm just going to give you the information that around the fund. So it's called the GM Spaces Fund, and it's currently open for applications at the minute. And like I say, it's come out of the conversations we've been having across the system. And Carrina's already touched on really, the two objectives we've got is to explore this question around how can we change the systems that perpetuate severe and multiple disadvantage in Greater Manchester? So how can we create or develop healthier systems that will support community and not act as barriers to community? So we're really interested in that question, and that's part of the fund really we want to explore within the fund. And also, as Carrina said, our networks are limited in some ways, so we want to expand our networks. We want to reach out to communities and groups that we've not got relationships with, and we want part of the fund. It's not just about here's the funding and we'll see you in 4 or 5 months. We want to start developing relationships with the groups that we fund. So it's really important that we're going on a journey together, really. So a learning journey where we're sharing each other's experiences and knowledge, and we're kind of working as a network across Greater Manchester. And we currently, as Carrina said, a lot of people that kind of the direction we've come in through the homelessness route, a lot of services in the homelessness sector do work predominantly with white, working class males. So we want to focus the fund on different groups really. So we want to specifically look at marginalised women as one of the key priorities. So groups that are run and formed by women, and also young people as well. So it doesn't have to be both, it could be one or the other, but groups that are working with young people and groups that are working with, or groups that are formed of young people and women, both that have experienced marginalisation. And we do want to work with more BAME communities as well. So we really want to prioritise people within your networks. So yeah, so we're looking at diversifying our network so that we've got a broader experience of different people within the system, a more diverse group of people. And the sorts of things we're looking at, so we want these to be independent spaces, safe spaces, so that they're run by the groups themselves. We don't want to impose what spaces look like. We don't want to impose what you need to talk about. They're the spaces that the group has the power over, really. So it's the group's space. But we're looking at things like how can we reveal the system back to itself? How can we look at revealing things that perhaps are there, but perhaps people aren't talking about? How can we find ways that we can question the system as well? A lot of communities and groups don't feel able to question what's going on in the system. How can we support groups to sort of work together to start questioning the system? And how can we dismantle the systems that aren't working? If they're not working for communities, what can we do that dismantles these communities, these systems, to build healthier systems? And we really believe that putting more power and decision making into the hands of communities themselves is a real positive step to doing that. So we're looking at those things, and that's kind of looking at the system as it is now. But we also want to look at actually what sort of system do we want in the future? What sort of system do we want to live in? So kind of what healing needs to take place. So there's a lot of trauma out there, a lot of negative, devastating experiences as well. So actually, and we never talk about it really. So how can we bring healing into the work that we do and the systems that we operate in? How can we reimagine what's going on? So really thinking about systems in a different way. It's bringing in different voices and experiences and perspectives to really reimagine the system, and then renewing the systems as well. So how do we dismantle the bits that aren't working, but refresh them as well? And how do we build on the bits that are working that are really positive and really amplify those really across the system? So they're the sorts of things that we're looking at, so that all people can live with dignity and opportunity in supportive communities. There is a little caveat to that as well, because we recognise that there's a lot going on at the minute, and obviously COVID is having a huge impact across communities. So if, particularly over winter as well, so if for the group you want to support or fund, it's just about actually how do we get through winter together? How can we work collectively and get through winter and survive as a group? Then that's fine as well. We think you know best, so we're opening the fund up. We're trying to have as few restrictions as possible. We think you know best how to run your space and what you need to focus on. So we're not trying to be too prescriptive, but we're interested in kind of these wider systems change, or how can we change the systems really? But you don't need to know anything before about that. So yeah, so you could focus on that. You could focus on one part of it. The only restriction we'll put in that the spaces themselves are either led by women that have experienced marginalisation or young people that have experienced marginalisation. They're the only two restrictions we're putting in really. And they could be new spaces and they could be existing spaces. Again, it's up to you really. Something that we're running alongside the fund as well, which is interesting, is we're going to work with what we're calling policymakers. So it's people that are in positions of power in the system. So they may be in a position where they can make the decisions, they hold the power at the moment. So we're going to work with them to see how can we encourage them to enter sort of these sorts of spaces on a more equal footing. So how can they come into the spaces and share the power and share decision making and not make it, not a traditional form of hierarchy. So we're going to work with those individuals, and we'd be really keen for the spaces that we fund to really start to think about who do they want to influence, who do they want to invite in, and if that's difficult to get them in, we can work with them to connect the groups and bring those people in to the spaces. But what's really important is that they're coming in on the group's terms and the spaces terms, not on that policymakers' terms. So quite often people get asked to meetings to somebody with lived experience or something to come and share their experiences, but it's on the terms of those in power. We want to kind of tip that up really and invite policymakers and those in power into spaces and groups, but on the terms of the groups themselves. So we think that's really important. And it kind of shifts the power that we feel. So we're not trying to put restrictions on who can apply. So you could be a charity, you could be a community group, an educational institution, you could be an individual, a network, a partnership, or a statutory body. As long as it's led by marginalised women and or young people, anyone can apply. And if you're more, and you don't have to be registered or anything like that, if you're a very informal group, we'd really welcome you to apply. We'd really want lots of different groups to come in to be part of the fund. And there's something on the website around how you can accept money as well if you're a very small informal group. So we're really trying to keep it as open as possible, really. I see Carrina's been putting some information up in chat. So the fund total itself is 250,000, but we're looking to fund about 30 projects. So that makes it quite a small grants fund, really. But we're hoping that once we start working with this wider group, so potentially 30 groups, and connecting them to each other, we're going to start to develop a really really interesting and vibrant networking community, really. So we're looking at sort of 2 different funds. So one is 2,000 to 500,000 for smaller spaces, and that might be a group that meets once a week. It might focus on one thing, maybe. Again, it's whatever they want to focus on. The larger spaces is 5,000 to 8,000, and that's for people that maybe have capacity to meet more than once a week, or they want to look at different things at the same time. So they really want to delve deeper into some of this system stuff as well. So that's what we would. It's not necessarily about size; it's more about capacity and what communities can put into it. And the funding is just about funding any costs that are incurred to hold the space. So obviously at the moment that might be a virtual space. So if it's digital issues or data that people haven't got on their phones, then that would definitely fund that. I mean, in normal circumstances, whatever that means, obviously we'll probably be meeting in person, but at the moment we imagine a lot of it might be digital. So if the cost is digital and lots of people are digitally excluded, then that's absolutely fine too. It's whatever cost you incur to get the spaces up and running and to operate, really. So we're very, again, open to that, what that looks like. Just in terms of kind of our relationship with whoever we fund, really, and I'll say the word monitoring, but we're not monitoring. So I'll say the word, but we're not interested in a report or anything like that. There's no particular outcomes that we want you to achieve or anything, or there's no outcomes we want you to achieve, really, except to meet as a group. What we're really interested in, as Carrina said, is the learning from it. So we would like to know what's happening and when it's happening, so we can share that information. So if there's any sort of special things that are going on or particular events or anything like meetings, then it'd be great for us to share that, so we can let people know. We'd love you to capture what you're doing somehow, but and as creative as possible, really. So it could be that you collect what you're doing through poetry or art or photographs or blogs or video blogs, whatever's right for the group, really. However you want to capture the sort of experience and the journey that you're on, that works for us. We are going to hold monthly drop-ins, so virtual drop-ins so the funding's between January and May that we'll allocate it, and we'll hold monthly drop-ins in that time. So that's a chance for you to meet everybody else, for us all to get to know each other a bit, for you to bring what you're experiencing in terms of the spaces or in your particular area or your particular group. It'll be a chance for us potentially to bring stuff that we think might be useful for you. And just it's to have conversations about what's happening in your spaces, and for us all to learn together, really. And what we'll do as well, we will have a follow-up conversation afterwards as well, just to see what you've learned and anything that's come up. But one of the key things is we're really interested to know what has worked, but we're really, really interested to know what hasn't worked. So we want to develop an honest relationship with you, and for us, something that doesn't work doesn't mean it's a failure. It's just it's an opportunity to learn. So we would like to know that, and we can build on that, really. So it might be that you set off in a direction to do something, it doesn't quite work like that, and you have to start again. That's fine. We're absolutely fine, and we would love people to be open about that. So yeah, so we really want to find out what's worked and what hasn't, because we'll all learn more from what hasn't worked, really. And also what we're looking at, really. So as I say, the deadline itself, actually, that's quite important. There's the 13th of December. So there's still quite a few weeks to go. And because of the break, the Christmas break and everything, we won't let people know till the beginning of January. And we're expecting the groups and spaces to get up and running from January to May. And what we're looking at is all the spaces that we've funded. So that would be potentially 30 spaces, all the existing funded groups that are involved in Lankelly Chase work in Greater Manchester, all the connections we've got. We really want to bring everybody together in June or July. So after the funding's happened, and just bringing everyone together to really learn together. And it's really about, this is the next phase, really, about actually we've got all these connections across Greater Manchester. What are we doing? What should we be focusing on? What are we learning? What's the system telling us? What where should we be focusing our work and stuff. So it's a real opportunity to help start to shape Lankelly Chase's role in Greater Manchester going forward, and how we can become a much stronger community together, really. So personally, I'm really excited about that aspect of it as much as anything. Just an opportunity to really bring in a much more diverse and wider group of people to start to shape this work going forward. And I think it's, I can say because I've got one foot in, because I'm a Lankelly Chase associate, but not a staff member, but I think it's an amazing opportunity for everybody and for Greater Manchester to be able to, I think they really have given us an opportunity to really develop something completely different and exciting. So yeah, I think it's going to be great. We are running some drop-ins as well. So in the bidding round. So I think there's only 2 more dates we've got, which is the next 2 Wednesdays. So not this week, but the 2nd of December and the 9th. There's one at 12 and one at 6. So that's if you've got any questions after today, you can just drop into those. Just a little bit just before I finish on what we won't fund. So we're not going to fund. We want to work with people that want to be part of a learning community. So you don't need to know what that is or what that means even, but it's just that you want to come on a journey with us and we share what you're learning as you go, really. So we're really looking for spaces that want to do that, and how we can look at this question about how we change the systems that perpetuate severe and multiple disadvantage. As Carrina said as well, Lankelly Chase has got a big focus around justice, healing and liberation. So if it's a space that doesn't, in some way, it doesn't promote them or isn't rooted in them as well, we won't be funding those really as well. So we're looking at inclusive, supportive communities that we want to fund. And also as well, it's not just about devolving power and offering funding to the spaces, it's how the spaces operate as well. So we really want to support spaces where power is shared amongst the group. So it's not a traditional one person rules the group. It's kind of how does that group share power? And that might be something you want to explore as part of the funding, which would be interesting. And again, obviously, if they have to be run or led by women or young people that experience marginalisation. And also the last thing we don't fund is around service delivery as well. So there are a lot of services. I know funding is really difficult at the moment. But we're not looking to fund service delivery in Greater Manchester. So I think I've said quite a lot there on the fund. So,
Thank you.
Yeah, just very brief. I'll put it in here as well. There is an email address as well. So if any questions that we don't get to today, you can always throw them into that email address. So yeah, that's the fund.
Thank you, Paul. I'll bring people in for any clarifications and questions now, but just a clarification from my end. So it's been great meeting Paul and Carrina, and they have been to the GM Leaders Forum to tell us a little bit about Lankelly Chase and the work they're doing in GM. So as an outcome of that has been this meeting today. We've not been involved with any of the co-production of their work in GM or are involved with any of their panels or anything like that. So I'm hearing it just as new thing as everybody else is here today in terms of what this is about. Can you just also just say a little bit about how, is it an online application, Paul? So one clarification you could give is, what kind of application is it that people can be thinking that they might have to complete? And secondly, that it's all quite at pace in terms of a Christmas period and starting the projects when they get decisions in January. Are you set up to get the funding out to groups quickly, and will they get the whole grant up front? These are important issues for groups because often I find that you're already delivering 3 months down the line before you get any money through because of the red tape and bureaucracy. So if you could just clarify so people know, what they would be expecting.
Yeah, I mean, I'll answer the first question. Carrina, could you as like, so that's a very good question about the application, which I missed out on what I was going to say. So it is an online application, but you can download it and put it into Word if that's easier. We've kept the questions hopefully fairly simple. It's just 10 questions. There's word counts on it, so we don't need lots and lots of information. If you'd prefer to submit your application in a video or a different way of doing it, then that's fine as well, as long as you answer the questions. And we're not, yeah, we're not focusing this application on organisations that have got bid writers and stuff like that. We're trying to keep it really simple, really accessible. We're excited about what we can see from the spaces. It's what you do in the spaces that's important. So we're really interested in that. So we've tried to keep it as simple as possible. Yeah, that's the first part. Carrina, I don't know if you.
Yeah, hang on. So who said? Is it Echoat? That's the right.
I can bring questions and things in. That's fine. I just wanted you to answer the grant application, the money, when will it flow?
Yeah, I know. I'm just mentioning the email address and just taking out the. Did you see that?
I've just seen it, yeah.
So yeah, so it's essentially. So firstly, I think obviously 250 grand is great, but we really do recognise that it is, in terms of the problems that we're all kind of holding here, it's a drop in the ocean. So I'm just going to put that out there, and but hopefully, and this is why it's really important to go and connect with other funders as well. I really want us to start looking at what's our collective power and what resources can we collectively do and put into the system. But first of all, I just wanted to kind of apologise that it is great that it's there, and I'm sad that it's not more. One of the reasons that we, around devolved decision making, and one of the reasons we've made the application form really simple is, so when we say a word count, it's things like there's a 250 word count, you know, it's a couple of sentences, bullet points and things like that, because we want to make sure that this isn't just another fund where bid writers and, you know what they're doing, and the rest of the system might not necessarily. So this for us really is about participation and ease of access. And we've done something similar in Scotland when we launched Hard Edges in Scotland. And so I can't promise to be as efficient as Ollie, who ran that, who loves detail, but I'll do my best. So internally, we are really set up to try to get the money out as quickly as possible. And our finance department are great. So it will be human error that holds up any process here, nowhere else. But we hope they're pretty efficient, so the money will be out as rapidly as possible. The terms and conditions are all really kind of lo-fi. Like, we really do want to reiterate that this is about what we're learning. It isn't about 5 people have gone through this space every 6 weeks or whatever. Not interested. Interested in the quality of the relationships, the depth of learning, the ambition to be part of a learning community, along with other change makers. But there are lots of people who might not even consider themselves change makers yet. And we don't really, you know, it's, you people, everyone on here knows much better than we do. This is the fund is based on good 4 months of listening, but also kind of years of recognizing what is going to be most useful in creating a critical mass of change makers. Great. And also just to also say that I think we've said that the activity should run between January and May, maybe June. So you might decide that you want to do that activity in April and May. Doesn't matter.
Great. Can I just bring in some people because there's some questions, I think, from people. So I'll bring them in as I've seen them. And if other people want to ask a question, put it in the chat box or please raise your hand. So Lena, you had a question from Global Arts Manchester. Yeah. Are you there?
Yes.
Yeah, apologies. I need to go on the school run. But please answer my question. And my colleague is here and I can watch the recording. Thank you.
So in terms of whether we can fund moving costs, we haven't even thought about that actually. So we'd have to get back to you on that, Lena.
Great,
Will-
Lena,
Yeah.
could you, if you haven't, can you leave your email so they can get back?
Yeah,
to
I'll
you?
I'll
leave
follow
it
through.
because we're the same organisation. Sorry.
Yeah.
Great. And then there's one around, so, oh,
So there was somebody from Highways who wanted to ask something about organisations based in 2 locations.
yeah,
I think. Yeah,
Do you want to ask that? Highways,
Yeah, it's me.
go on.
Thank you very much for that. We operate from 2 locations. So we operate from Highway Hope, which is just based in Matthews Lane at Levinsville, and we run quite lots of projects from there. And we've expanded our community hub to Stockport. And we're just starting off in Stockport, kind of a bit of similar projects we run in Matthews Lane. So I'm just wondering, should I just concentrate on writing for Stockport, or can I still write for both Matthews Lane and Stockport?
Good question, Carrina, Paul.
I would say that if they're 2 different spaces, then yeah, I think that's fine. I mean, Carrina, correct me if I'm wrong, but yeah, I mean, it might be, you might want to look at, is there a way not necessarily to combine the space, but combine the learning from the 2 spaces. But, and I suppose if you put 2 bids in, you're not necessarily going to get both accepted or anything. So, but it'd be fine to do that. Yeah, if they are 2 different spaces, then I think.
Okay, I just thought I'd double check.
Yeah, it's a good question.
and again, we can triple check that with the rest of the team. But the other thing,
Excuse me.
the other thing, oh, sorry, just very quickly, is that's definitely a larger spaces proposal. So if you were going to only do 1 application, make sure you're going for the highest amount in the larger spaces one.
All right. Okay.
Great. Can I bring in Akira? You had a question, Akira.
Yeah, and actually, can I sort of clarify the question that Lena asked around moving? Because the problem we're having is our landlord is not sort of getting his head around COVID. So the way we have a package of funding around what we deliver, and my question's about service delivery eventually, but is that we had a sort of higher side to our space where people could come in, hire the space for exhibitions, workshops, and we decided during COVID that we couldn't manage that safely, and we won't be managing that forward, so that we would deliver with our partners in the community, which is then completely cut down on our income base, and we can't find the money that he wants. We're now looking to relocate. So it's sort of part of the actual problem of what we've been going through. It's not a sort of, oh, we just want to go somewhere differently. We're being forced out because of the sort of current situation. And we're being creative. We're delivering currently online sort of wellbeing workshops, and we are also finding ways to get like art packages into the hands of the women that we're working with. So we're a Black women-led organisation. What I find difficult, and it may be just the language that you're using, is service delivery. We won't fund service delivery. Now, everything about us is based in the delivery to the communities that we engage with, which is often very diverse projects, but it's always immersed in art as a tool for well-being. So I don't know what, so even in framing any of the exploration work we've done, like we've just spent some of the summer working as a collective on doing our sort of aims and values, but we do it in a creative way. So what does that mean to you? We won't fund service delivery, because I think you're using a language I don't understand.
Yeah, this is where we maybe, I mean, what you're describing is we would fund that. So yeah, so we are talking, I think, from a different perspective. I think what we're coming from is, like Carrina said, a lot of where Lankelly Chase's work started was in like things like homelessness, mental health, criminal justice, and substance misuse services. So they are in the community offering services that are commissioned locally to directly to people. So it's those types of services that are already there. So say, I suppose in this example, I suppose if somebody wanted to staff costs to run I don't know actually, it's an example, but it's more, I think, services that are locally commissioned through things like homelessness services or things like that we're not looking to fund it.
Okay.
But if you're running a space in this case, and part of that cost is to cover obviously your cost to run that space, and then within that you're delivering a service in effect, then I think that's different really in terms of what you're offering.
So you might need to look at that a little bit, because I think it's a really important question. So for example, there are mental health services commissioned all over the place.
Yeah.
We know that mental health services for BAME communities are not commissioned, particularly BAME led, and those that there are gaps with. So we've just got loads of needs in there in the community. We've created spaces to deliver that service because it's a targeted service. So you might need to kind of look at that a little bit in terms of how you define that. I've got Fariba who's waiting to ask a question.
Yes, actually my colleague Safiya from Community Dosti, she's going to ask a question, please.
Okay, go ahead, Community Dosti.
Thank you very much. My name is Safiya from Community Dosti. The question is, shall we do a research in this project as well? And the other question is, shall we do it as a partnership with another community? That's this community is not include this group. And so that's my question. Thank you very much.
Paul, Carrina?
just trying to work out who's going to speak first. Yes, we really do encourage partnership working, and collaboration. So if you can do that, brilliant. I think if you're doing research, your question about research, again, it's one of these things, we would call it learning. So if you want to learn, and what we're asking is, please, can you share your learning as you're going through this, effectively a project? And you can share that learning as creatively, and we encourage you to do it as creatively as possible. So if that is research, then great, yes. But don't, as long as you don't come at it and think, do I need to evaluate? Definitely don't want evaluation. We want a sense of, what are you learning about, how you might heal the system, or what it might look like in the future, and things like that, and what you're seeing, which, coming back to Akua's point, is if you use creativity to do that, then that's both the space and the service. Does that make sense?
Yes, yes, thank you very much.
No problem.
Excellent. Go on, Carrina.
I was just going to say, coming back to this point around, and you're right, we do need to look at it, and in part it's because I literally was talking about this the other day back at Lankelly Chase. But just to say, the reason that we are steering away from funding services in the traditional sense of the word, as Paul spoke about, is because the more we fund services, the more the system relies on services. And actually, it all needs to be shifted, because what happens at the moment with services is that you need to go to, especially somebody who is on the margins of the margins, they need to go to the homelessness service to get a house. They need to go to the mental health services to get their mental health. It doesn't work. We all know this, right? So for us, it's more around, well, how do you tap into working with a person holistically? How do you tap into the strengths that they bring, that all of us bring? And what we found is that very traditional services cannot do that. So Akua, what you're talking about in terms of creative led approaches to working with people is absolutely kind of more of the, if we wanted to talk about territories, where we would like to be in.
Akua, do you want to come back on what you've just posted in there?
Okay, I don't know who's seeing the chat and who isn't. Yeah, it's I just reading, so I've got the website up and I'm reading and I'm listening and seeing who's here. It occurs to me that what we're currently doing, so I got heavily involved just on an individual basis within a local mutual aid group, a large one that covers Ardwick and Longside. And one of the things I'm really interested in is that volunteer community itself, and supporting both the staff and the volunteers, as well as the sort of participatory group. And so what we're currently doing is we are back in delivery mode, and as I said, we're doing it online with some backup in person, one-on-one, and handing out materials. And already that has, through one of the women we're working with, who's a worker within the workforce, has then brought in other people who are both their engagement group and their volunteers. It's sort of, and I'm really keen for us to do that. So we're now looking at funding separately. We've just put in a bid to work with the volunteers within the mutual aid group. And this, I think, is a really interesting way of also looking at the health and well-being of the volunteer workforce and the workforce. And is that something, so that we'd actually come, I imagine here that we would want to come in specifically to work with the other partners. Yeah, okay.
Sounds good. Yeah.
We work much better with examples and questions.
So that's quite good. I'm not quite sure how it fits into your criteria of marginalised women and young people kind of led. So are you looking for? It would have to be
led. Yeah, it would have to be a group led by women or young people. But yeah.
We're an entirely, just by happenstance, we happen to be an entirely women-led organisation, and predominantly African heritage. So we have women from other backgrounds as well. So that's what I was saying, just our very being fits the criteria. Okay. Yeah.
Brilliant. I think I've captured everybody's questions and discussion. I hope that's been useful, because we've just got a few minutes left, and I'd like to announce something else before I leave. But can I thank Paul and Carrina for their contribution today and sharing this with us. I hope people will apply. You've still got time. Deadline is 13th of December. And, you know, it's quite a fairly quick turnaround. You could be starting a project in January, which would be great. So Paul and Carrina, thank you very much for your contribution. And you've got their email now for Paul, certainly. And if you've got any questions, please do that. So just before we finish.
Thanks for inviting us in as well. Sorry. Thanks for inviting us. It's been great. Thank you.
And I'm really curious, do people, from what we've said, does it sound interesting? And can people do that or that if they think they're going to apply?
Yeah, it was good, very good.
Wonderful. And if there's any reservations, for us, access is really important. So if you really, we're here to support people just putting in an application. So if somebody needs me to type, I'm happy to do that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Right. So I think just before I finish, just from the GM BAME network, I just want to let you know that for a lot of you, you will know, and some of you have, I know, applied and been successful. We've had really good support from Comic Relief and National Emergency Trust, and have been giving out funding at GM level for groups, particularly focusing around small organizations and groups that are often kind of left behind. So we have done that first phase. We were very, very fortunate in that we've had top-up funding from Comic Relief, which means that we can do another round of funding, which is excellent news for us. So we'll hopefully have another almost just over £100,000 of grants to give out to GM. And the other thing that we lobbied hard for, which we have got, is that the next round does not have to be spent by the end of March. It can go on until September 21, which gives everybody a little bit more space compared to some of the, most of the other emergency funding that's out there that comes to an end in March. So we will be launching the next round pretty much on the same basis as we have done now. So people will be able to access quite quickly soon our micro grants, which are up to £1,000 of emergency aid, to get that out there. And that we are in a second wave, and that organizations have been continue to be hit hard, living through a lot of hardship. So that will come in extremely useful for some of those organizations to help their communities. We will go on to do another step up of the next level of grants, which we're hoping at that small grants of £3,000 as well. So we will be launching that. We are hoping to put a Zoom meeting in for the 30th next week, on the 30th in the morning, so that we can launch that and tell you. So you will get that information through the GM BAME Network pretty soon. We are also supporting another funder in London who is going to be launching a fund on the 25th of November. They are also part of that comic relief, but they have access to other funds as well. And we will be helping organizations locally access that funding as well. So hopefully on the 30th, I'll be able to tell you a bit more about that as well, and help organizations not only access the funding we've got at GM, but the funding at that national level that you can also go for. So hopefully, and if anybody's got any questions, by all means, come back to me at GM BAME Network or Manchester BME Network. Happy to supply you with information. But thank you very much for coming to this, and have a lovely rest of the day. Thank you very much. Keep well and keep safe.